So we are recording this video on June 28th, 2023, which is 2 days away from the famous GA4 deadline, where you need to switch over from Universal Analytics, and Universal Analytics is going to stop measuring or recording data. So in the past week or so, a bunch of people have been asking us, how do I do this in GA4? How do we do that in GA4? And we wanted to record a video to answer one of the more difficult questions there, which is how do I measure conversions in GA4? In particular, loaded in that question is usually the way I used to do it in Universal Analytics. And so we're going to start by just looking at some of the more basic reports and then get to the more complicated ones that we have created and we're not seeing most people talk about. So we have done our research to figure this out because months ago we freaked out over this question because GA4 is kind of a pain, as most people online talk about. And so in our research, we found there's a ton of just like Google help docs and other YouTube videos explaining the basic reports that are on, the side here of GA4. But that's easy, and we'll go over that real quick. But there are some more complicated questions to answer, like not just which pages or landing pages on my site led to conversions, well, there's a built-in report here for it, but something more complicated like, well, what was the first landing page of users who converted? And anyone who knows Grow and Convert, knows us, knows that that's a question we've been asking and answering in regular GA or old GA, Universal Analytics, for a long time because we've built our business on being the content/SEO agency that actually answers that question and measures conversions. And it's important to measure it from a first click basis because it's one thing if somebody lands on your site, if somebody lands on your site multiple times and their first visit to your site and their first exposure to your brand was via, in our case often, a blog post that ranked for a high intent buying keyword that we created for one of our clients, but it took multiple sessions for them to convert. This basic landing pages report is going to only show the landing pages of that last session in which the conversion happened. But if the last session was just them finally deciding to sign up for your demo, start your free trial, buy your shoes, clothing, supplements, or whatever on your e-commerce store, or in our case, fill out an agency lead form, the conversion event. If that last session was them just typing in the URL of your homepage directly and going there, your landing pages report, the basic report is going to say that brought that conversion. The homepage did. But it didn't really, because the first exposure to the brand was the blog post in my hypothetical. So you need a report that will show that. Show, well, what are the earlier pages on the site, even if it's not the last session, that were responsible for these conversions. And that's not trivial, and we have not seen literature out there of how to do that in GA4. We have a way of doing it, even though it's not as nice as it was in Universal Analytics. So we're going to get into that now. So let's get into the basics of GA4. I want to cover real quick before we get into conversions that the real basic stuff of just traffic and users, there are reports for that. So you can see like in the acquisition report, traffic acquisition from different sources, how many users came from the sources, simple things like that. Like in the actual engagement, you can see pages and screens report here to see this is the equivalent of sort of the all content page views, like view or built-in report in Universal Analytics. Let me see, just make sure that I say that right. So that would be the equivalent of behavior, site content, all pages, for example, where we were here. So engagement, pages, and screens. So you can see different URLs on your site, how many views they got, how many users were there, average engagement time, which by the way, we're seeing is much lower. So there is some quirks here. And then you can even see conversions responsible for those pages. But let's get into this and think about it from a conversion perspective. So the most default or sort of simple, there's two questions that people want to ask when it comes to conversions, usually that marketers want to ask. What sources or traffic sources cause my conversion? And two, what pages on my site were most responsible for our conversion? And we're going to dig in a lot on the pages one as per what I already said. So let's actually just real quick go to the sources for conversion. So in this reports area, these are the built-in reports of GA4. Here you have like user acquisition or traffic acquisition. And this one just does it by, I think, add sessions, and this will do it by users, right? So new users and engage sessions. So there's some subtleties, but let's just use either of them for now, because really the question we're trying to answer here is which of these channels brought in conversions? So here, it's decently straightforward. You would say these are the channels that GA shows by default, and we'll look at something more specific. And there's all a bunch of information about the number of users from that channel, number of sessions from that channel, etc. But what we're talking about is events. And you would define events including conversions, and you could click and define specifics. So we could look at agency leads and email signups and course purchases. We'll look at email signups here as an example, and it'll say, and that's events. So we would say, okay, so direct traffic got us 108 email signups, organic search got us 156 in the date range we're looking at. Conversions reduces this. It's going to be redundant. I'll show you. So if we look at email signups here, it'll also show 341. It'll also show 108 for direct. It'll also show 156 for organic, because really all a conversion is in GA4 is an event that you've labeled as a conversion. Okay, and we'll look at that in just a second, but just to complete this idea and show the limitations, what it means is, let's answer this specifically in the context of sessions. It means that direct traffic in the date range we're looking at, sessions that started from direct traffic were responsible for 108 email signups. Sessions that started from organic search were responsible for 156 signups. Okay? But what the limitation of that is what I was saying previously, but now let's talk about it more concretely. What if users have multiple sessions? They usually do. So in the case of our site, if we're looking at email signups, or we could look at agency leads or whatever, it's very possible that, let's think about the concept of an agency lead. It's likely that someone comes to our site and reads multiple articles and comes back to our site, maybe joins our email list, and we have leads that say, I've been following you guys for years, okay? It's possible that they come back multiple times. In fact, likely. Most people don't land on our site and in that very session they become an agency lead or even sign up with their email. So if that first session, the thing that brought them to grow and convert was organic search, but the session in which they decided to give their email or become an agency lead and fill out the lead form, they just typed in growandconvert.com because it was 15 sessions later and they just knew our brand and they typed it in to go do it. It's going to count that person's conversion under direct, but a really important piece of information was missing, which is that actually organic search in a particular blog post, say, that was ranking is what really exposed them to our brand. So that concept is very important for you to understand, to really understand how conversions are measured and the difference between the different reports we're going to look at in this video. And that's summarized visually here. This is an internal document we use for our own team called the GA models. You only need to worry about this first one right now, which is just this idea that GA measures things in terms of sessions. And this dimension of a landing page in GA, right? This idea of a landing page in GA that we're going to look at heavily in a second is something that's called session scoped, meaning you can consider it a property, an aspect of a session, not of a user. So a user that has multiple sessions has multiple landing pages because they have a unique landing page for every session. Oh, they Googled this blog post to land here. Then later they came back from an ad, hypothetically. Then eventually they just directly typed in the homepage and they bought our, shirts that we sell on our e-commerce store. Or they signed up to be an agency lead for Grow and Convert, or whatever your business conversion event is. So the limitation is that these default reports, like this one, are session scoped, meaning it's showing you, in this case, the channel, but also we'll look at the landing page in a second of the session in which the conversion happened, but that's incomplete because the original session or one of the other ones also contributed. In fact, it's arguable, and we argue, that the first session is probably the most important thing for many, many businesses, because that's the first exposure to the brand. And the last session is just when they finally decided to do it. And it's really important to do this here. And we've been measuring this for our clients forever using first click attribution and universal analytics in the old GA. And so that's the key, is how to do that. So by the way, so you can also change this to session source medium. And look, even the way they write this is telling. It's the sessions source medium. So the previous one was just this channel grouping that's sort of like the group of the channel: direct, organic. But source medium gets a little bit more specific. Most people that have dealt with old GA are familiar with this. Instead of just organic, it'll say Google organic as opposed to say like Bing or whatever. And so, you know, this Twitter CPC, we do Twitter ads. So this tells you kind of the same thing, right? But via source medium of that session. Okay. How do you add landing pages to it? There's several different ways. Most things in Google Analytics, in old Google Analytics and this GA4, you can do in multiple different ways. One simple way is in any of these reports, like traffic acquisition, we can add a secondary dimension of landing page. And in GA, landing page has been replaced with landing page plus query string. That's just a detail. It means that it's going to use the URL, including question mark equals blah, 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 if you have some, parameters in the URL. So here we can look at it as a combination of the two. So this isn't telling us just what landing pages, resulted in certain conversion events, or how many conversion events were responsible from each landing page. Same session, remember, we're still operating in default GA models, GA reports, which is just looking at one session at a time. But it's not doing it for just landing pages, but it's doing it for the combination. So you can say, okay, this particular email, someone's email list where they emailed out our article, and people who landed on our article from that email list, there were 7 email signups, or people who Googled this particular Medium post, there were 90 email signups. That's this one way to do it. The other simple way to do it is an engagement landing page, and it's the landing page report. And there we see just the landing pages. So this answers a similar question, but says, regardless of the source, there were 17 conversion events. I have it set to just all events, but we could go back to just email signups here, and say there were however many, it's still updating, email signups from this particular landing page. It may actually just be 17. Oh, because we just set up the other events or something. Or sometimes GA is buggy and it just doesn't update, okay? But again, the limitation is it's doing this for just this session. So if we want to know, well, what was the first session, it gets trickier. So let's look at that. We're going to look at 2 ways that we can do that we have devised. And these are non-default ways, okay? The first way is using this report called the model comparison tool. And I want to actually look at that in our old GA in Universal Analytics for Grow and Convert. So here we can go in and we can look all the way in deep inside like the default reports, this concept of a model comparison tool. And here we have, and what this allows us to do is saying, from a last touch basis, aka this, the last landing page, how many conversions were there? But we can also add other models, like we can add from a first touch basis, how many were there? So this says for organic search, there were 0 on a last touch basis for whatever conversion I have here, members payment. Let's do thank you any, which is any of our thank you pages. So this could be an agency lead plus all email signups or whatever. So it says for organic search, there were 63 people hitting one of our thank you pages in this time range from a last touch basis, this model. But from a first touch basis, model comparison tool first click, there were 86 from organic search. And that makes sense actually that it's bigger because of what we talked about. Is there's going to be a bunch of people whose first touch was organic search, but later they came in and when they converted, they may have just gone directly to the website or something like that, right? And what was nice about this old model comparison tool is we could also have this primary dimension be landing pages, landing page URL. So then we could say, okay, going viral medium got 69, in this case, people to the thank you page. The majority of those are email signups on a last touch basis and 80 on a first touch basis. And so you can, filter this. If you were a SaaS company, you could have like demo requests, requested a demo and see now which of your pages got the most, not demo requests, not just from a last touch basis, but from a first touch basis as well. And why that's important and what that really helps with is with content marketing and measuring the efficacy of content and SEO, like long form content, because often there's a ton of pages. Like clients come to us being like, we have all these blog posts, but we're not sure if they're converting. There's a ton of pages, so you want to ask this question. And often this kind of organic search process of customer acquisition requires multiple sessions. So a blog post could very well be part of someone's research process before they request a demo of your enterprise software or before they purchase your item from your e-commerce store, like a hiking boot. There may be multiple things, like you ranked for best hiking boot and they Googled that, and then later they saw an ad and they thought about it again and they came back and they added one to cart, and then finally they decided, you know what, I'm gonna buy these hiking boots. And they went, that session started with them opening their computer and typing in, davishhikingboots.com and buying. And if you didn't use first click, you would think that conversion happened from direct, but it didn't really. That blog post, how to choose the best hiking boot or whatever, was the thing that brought it in. That's why this is so important. In GA4, how do we do this? Well, we have to now go from Explorer reports to advertising. And inside advertising, there are these, and there is this model comparison tool here. So it again defaults to just channel groupings, but one big sort of limitation, the first limitation versus the old GA is in the old GA, we could change the primary dimension to landing pages as I just did. And I just switched it back to show you again. But in this new GA, we actually can't. So landing pages is not an option here. If I type landing pages, there's no options. It only lets the primary dimension be things related to the traffic source, either this default channel group or source medium or source or just medium or just campaign. So what we have to do to answer the question of what pages on my site were responsible for conversions is add landing pages as a secondary dimension. This isn't the end of the world. And as GA4 tends to be, buggy, it's not showing me any landing page URLs. And I think that could be due to, let's just reload. Here we go. See, it's just don't freak out when it does things like this. Reload, come back tomorrow. It does weird buggy things. So that's GA4 for you. Hopefully they iron those out in due time. So this isn't the end of the world. So again, we have conversion events. I think I had already selected thank you any to kind of keep the story consistent. So again, it's people who reach any of our thank you pages. The vast majority of these are people who are signing up for our email list. And what I mean by it's not the end of the world is like, yes, it would be nice if this was the primary dimension, because I wouldn't have, if I wanted the total number of people converting from this going viral medium article of ours, I would need to now add them up every time it shows up. Oh, okay, it showed up here from organic search and then one from direct, and I need to add it up. Sure, but you're going to get the pairings of them. So each row now is going to answer a slightly different question of not how many last click or other or first click conversions did we get from this article. It'll be like, how many last and first click conversions did we get from this article from organic search? And there'll be a separate row for this. You could, in theory, export this into a CSV and add up the totals from these, or you could just add it up manually. Okay, this isn't the total end of the world. Here is what's key. Today, when I'm recording this video, again, this is June 28th, 2023, so 2 days before GA4 switch happens, first click is an option here. But Google has said in articles that this is going to eventually be phased out. I believe they say in September of 2023. So depending on when you're seeing this video, you may not see first click here anymore. What they're doing is trying to move to this data-driven model. We don't like this because we have no idea how this works because Google's not telling people. It is just saying that this is a smart machine learning attribution model. Okay? Let me explain what that means if you're like, what in the world? Again, think of a scenario where there are multiple sessions of a user and eventually they convert. And of those, there's multiple different landing pages. A nice analogy is that e-commerce one. Say, we're selling hiking boots, davishishikingBoots.com, and they first come in via a blog post of how to buy the best hiking boots. Later, they see a retargeting ad and they click in via that ad. And then finally, one day, they just are like, finally, I'm going to buy the hiking boot, and they just type in and they come in direct. So the landing page of the session in which they converted is direct, but there were other sessions. The ad did something, and the blog post did something. Their data-driven model here, where were we? Their data-driven model is just saying, listen, trust us. We're using some model. Who the heck knows how it works? And, we're going to like ascribe the percentage of that conversion that we think should be allocated to, the various traffic sources of these sessions and the various landing pages of this session. We don't know how it works. I have no idea. And so I would rather know what model I'm using. So last click, even though it has its limitations that we've discussed already, at least I know what that is, that it's measuring this. But data-driven, I just have no idea. Now, in this case, when I compare, it looks identical. So whatever data-driven is doing now seems to be last click. But at the same time, so is first click. And this could be that we have just been setting it up. And so it's just started measuring, oh, yes, thank you, any, I'm told was just set up like a couple days ago. So it's probably only measuring people in a single session. So let's switch to email sign up. And it is slight differences have emerged. So in this case, 14 last click and 13 for the thank you page. I mean, that's the page we're actually measuring. Let's see, that's also the thank you page. The home page. So referral traffic to the home page shows 7 in last click and 10 in first click. So some differences are starting to emerge. But this is one way of answering this question in a more nuanced way than just a single last click attribution report. And for however long you can use first click, otherwise you can also use linear. And I don't know if they're going to shut off linear as well. We can figure this out. But linear would say, I'm going to give a fractional conversion to all the different landing pages of the different sessions. So if this was one conversion and there were 3 sessions, it would be 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. That's what linear does. And that's why there's points. There's it's not an integer amount because there can be fractional conversions here. So that's this limitation. For us, what's really important to us is to be able to generate these reports for clients for specific blog posts only, the blog posts we write for the clients, right? Because we want to be able to report on that. That used to be easy in the old model comparison report. You could just do any kind of advanced filter you want. You could be landing page, matches regex, and just list a bunch of them, right? 1 or 2 or whatever. You could list their URLs. You can't do that in this GA. You have to add a filter and do it in a little bit of a backwards or roundabout way. You can say filter to only the landing pages, and you can do this. So if you have something like /blog and you want to look at just your blog post, you're in luck. You can just go like this. We don't have a /blog, but we have categories. So we could look at only landing pages from the blog post that we've written in the content marketing category. And that's kind of the equivalent for us. So I could do this one, and apply. And now it's only the blog posts that have content marketing in them. So that's actually pretty useful. If you are just, for a lot of brands, all of their blog content is just on /blog. And if you want to look at just that, you can. Or if you want to look at conversions that come from any kind of specific URL, you can. But you can't, what you cannot do, so let's remove this filter and add another one. What you can't do is a custom regex of just specific URLs. If you want to do that for a landing page, what you have to do is go through and just find the URLs and manually click them, which is really frustrating because what we like to do is say, here are all the blog posts we're interested in. It's one regex. And if it converts and when it converts, it shows up in our report. This one, you have to like know to click on it, which is kind of tedious. But that's a detailed nuance that's probably not going to be of interest to most people other than us or other agencies. Okay. So this is the first more advanced way to answer the question, which pages on my site are driving conversions, the model comparison tool. Now, let's look at another way to do it. And this is what we kind of call, we call it different names, either the segment method, or we can call it the any touch report. And so let me just go through and actually build it with you. And it's going to take some time, but it's important and it can help you really become a little bit more advanced with GA4 and measuring conversions here. So we're going to start from the beginning. I could have clicked untitled exploration. So actually, no, we need to do it on a different account. Yep. So I've done it here. And I think this was what I just started. So let's just click from the beginning again. Internal error. See, GA4 is buggy, but if you click in a different way, the bug goes away. So what this is, here's what we're going to ask. This is going to be a slightly different question we're going to ask, which is this any touch idea. Forget the name of this for a second. We're going to say, show me all landing pages of any session for users who eventually converted. Why is this important? Because often, just as we said, it's very limiting to say, I only want to know the landing pages of the last session that converted, because it could just be a bunch of direct or whatever, and these initial sources are important to the conversion, and you would have missed that information. Similarly, the first click, what we set up in model comparison tool, well, when we were in the model comparison tool, was first and last click. But internal sessions are equally important. So if they came via an ad, and later they Googled a blog post that was really good and convincing to buy your hiking boots. In our example, it was like how to choose the hiking boot, and they saw yours and it was really interesting. That landing page is actually really important to the conversion, and you would want to know. If you were part of the SEO team or you were evaluating the results of the SEO team, you would want to know, okay, those blog posts were a landing page of some internal session for people who converted. And this would allow us to get that information. So we're going to do that here. And we're going to do that by creating a custom report. Okay. And we have these already created. So if we go back here, well, you saw if you rewind the video, there was a bunch of these reports already created. We're going to show you how to create that from scratch. The key, the foundation of this report is creating a user segment that basically tells GA, this is the sequence that I'm interested in. I'm interested in people who land on certain pages on my site, like /blog, if that's what you're interested in, and eventually convert. That's referred to in GA segment speak as a sequence. So that's what we're going to add. So you open up this segment. Let me just do this again so you see it. You open this up, you build a new segment. It's a user segment because we're interested in fundamentally the behavior of users. If you do a session segment, you're sort of limiting yourself to only creating segments that are sort of about things that happen in a single session. And as we said, we don't want that. We want it for users. So we click this. And this is just if you want to create conditions like show me users who, have such and such property. We want to do a sequence. So the first thing we'll do, see, GA4 is buggy like this. Let's try this again. It's just a simple bug usually. And there, now it's filled in. This is GA4. It's good for you to see that so you don't freak out when it happens. So again, we're interested in this idea of landing pages. So we'll say the landing page URL was, and again, most of you guys can say something like it contained /blog. We don't have that on our site. So we'll say it contains /content marketing, which for us are blog posts that are in the category that we call content marketing. Okay. And it'll give you a little estimate. And if you see errors or whatever, just reload or what have you. So there's 11,000 sessions in whatever date range we're in, this date range for people who hit any blog post that has the word content marketing in its URL. And we're interested in people who at some point later convert. And in GA speak, that's called indirectly followed. I think directly followed by would be, I have to be careful here. It would either be in the same session or maybe even the actual next interaction, but we just never use that because we're not interested in something that happens so directly. We're just saying, if you hit any of these landing pages that we're interested in, and at some point later converted, we want to count you. That's literally what we're trying to do. And so here we would say, what were we looking at? Email sign up as an example. And you would fill that in with whatever event is interesting to you. And you don't have to put any parameter in there, just the existence of that event. So now it's already giving us a preview saying, well, there were 337 sessions, specifically from 117 users, where they hit a landing page that had content marketing in it and signed up for their email address. And so you can name this segment content marketing to email, for example, and hit save. So now we have the segment here. So what we are doing here is we're going to build a table. So we've put this table here, and we're going to count how many people, how many users have done that. So the only thing that's added right now is the segment. So for the table, we need rows and we need values. We're not going to do anything in columns. It's not intuitive, but you'll get the hang of it in a second. So for rows, we're going to find the landing page dimension that we've been talking about this whole time and import. So it's here. You have to drag it into, your table. So we'll put it into the row here. And then it still doesn't show anything until you give it values to show for every landing page. So what it's saying in the table is, I'm saying list landing pages like this. I'm kind of reproducing something kind of similar to this. And so for the values, we're going to say, well, we want to know the number of users for each of those landing pages. So here we'll put users, search the metrics for users. And it's bugging on me again. Okay, and we're going to get total users because right now I don't care between new and returning, but of course you can play with that if that's of importance to you. And ignore columns, we're going to put this in values. And then the first table emerges. So let's pause here. We'll beef up this table, but for now I'll pause. This is telling us something important already. And we saw this in the preview, but it's important here. So you can save this, right? Save this as content marketing posts to email signups. Okay. And it's saying 117 users fulfilled our segment, period. Regardless of what we put in rows and values, this number is really important. And it's important to think of the totals here as separate from the table. Okay. This is just a separate total because this won't necessarily add up. It'll add up to a lot more. In fact, you can actually see it already. 70 plus 30 by itself is 100. 17 itself gets to 117, and there's more. So this is adding up to a larger number than 117. I'll explain why in a second. But the first thing to know is don't even think of this as like adding. It's just a separate thing. The total, just think of it as completely separate from the table. 117 users is your most important thing. That's the number of people who fulfilled your segment. Meaning, if we were asking ourselves, show me how many users hit the landing pages of interest to us. In our case, people who hit content marketing landing pages and eventually converted. The answer is simple, 117 of them, period. Then, what does the table show? You're going to have to follow closely here. The GA4 is not easy, folks. It is after you get the hang of it. But the table shows a specific thing, which is just list any and all landing pages of those users, those 117 users, in any session, period, full stop. And show me how many of the users had this as one of their landing pages. But remember, a given user can have however many sessions they have. Most users will have more than one session. So because each session has a landing page associated with it, most users will have multiple landing pages associated with them inside GA4. So that's why there's a larger number of users if we add this up than this, because most users have multiple landing pages because they had multiple sessions and each session has a landing page. So 74 of these 117 users had one of their landing pages be going viral medium. 11 had one of their landing pages be pain point copywriting, and so on. If you're asking, so the next question we want to answer really is, well, what about conversions? Can we see the conversions by URL? And the answer is yes, if you do some specific things. So GA4 is complicated. So here we'll add the conversion event that we've been interested in, which is email. No, yes, we cannot. Key thing. What we can add for conversions is just the existence of conversions completely, which is here. So we'll add this import. Okay. And then we'll put this as a second value. So it'll add another column. Okay. So now we have conversions as well. Here's the thing. Why is the conversion number so big? There were 117 users but 241 conversions. Key thing. It's not possible here, at least yet, when we're recording this video, to have a column be a specific conversion event. You can only have it just say total conversions. That means it's giving you the total amount of conversions of all the events that you have marked as a conversion. So let's break from this for a second and hope that it's saved. How do you figure out what that is? It's in your admin and in events. Don't do it inside conversions. I'll explain it to you in a second. Here are all events we've created in GA for our account, and anything that you've toggled on here under the column mark as conversion counts as a conversion. The reason, by the way, to not do it here is if you untoggle this, it'll just disappear from the screen, but all the screen really is zeroing in on the events that you happen to have marked. So just do it in events, and then if you untoggle this, you still see it. You can like, okay, never mind, I want to toggle it back in. Just a little bit easier. So if we go back to the table we had created, here we go, we saved it, thankfully. If we go back here, then what conversions is showing in each of the rows is the total number of conversions of any of the 4 or 5 events that you had just seen that we had marked as a conversion from each of those landing pages. And again, this is showing it from the landing page. For each of these rows, the total conversions is all the conversion metrics, the events that we marked as a conversion, first of all. But second, the story of this row is still single session based, because this dimension is a session based dimension. In GA4, they call it session scoped. So it's still saying even if you were to do something where you went to admin and you untoggled everything except a single conversion event you were interested in, which is probably a smart thing to do, then you could say, okay, fine. The only conversion event that I've toggled as blue is, transaction of this hiking boot store, or free trial sign up of your SaaS company, or demo request of your enterprise SaaS company, or whatever, right? A single conversion, then I actually know what this means. Great. But this is still single session based. So in this report, the total would be very interesting. If you reduce conversions to just a single conversion metric, then and if we had done that hypothetically, we'd say, okay, there's 241 conversions from the landing pages that we're interested in, and those 241 conversions when someone landed on that landing page at any of their previous sessions. That's the total. The total tells us this. But a single row still goes back to telling you in a single session basis what the landing page is. So that says going viral medium was the landing page where a conversion happened 125 times in that session. Pain point copywriting was the landing page 14 times of the session in which the conversion happened. So that's important, is think about this total as completely a separate thing as landing pages. But The combination of model comparison tool that we looked at and this AnyTouch report, which gives us the total number of users from this AnyTouch report, allows us to answer the question of what pages on our site are contributing to conversions in a more nuanced way than just a single session viewpoint. So instead of just being like, we don't know what the first thing was that brought them in, we can answer that either in model comparison tool, but the first click will go away in a second, or we can do it here by looking at any of these landing pages and counting them if they count toward conversion, which gives you a more holistic view. So if you have blog content or SEO content and you know it's probably not going to be something where they convert in that same session, you can set this up and get this total number and just limit in your segment any blog posts you're interested in looking at or any category like /blog of pages and just say how many conversions has it been doing? And we suggest you track that month over month so you can see growth in that channel. That's what we do for our clients. And this allows us to do it in a more nuanced way when we know that a lot of our blog posts will be earlier in the research stage. Hope that helps.